Next presenter is Mr. Randy Hillier. Mr. Hillier served in the Canadian Parliament for 15 years and was the first member to publicly oppose his government's response to COVID. Probably didn't go well, did it? He is being threatened with a 3.5-year prison term for his support of the Canadian truckers. Mr. Hillier.
Thank you very much, Senator. And thank you also very much for your commitment to truth, freedom, and faith in your endeavors. I was elected to the Ontario Parliament on 4 different occasions and served 15 years. Ontario is Canada's most populous province and largest economy. On March 26, 2020, I became the first elected representative in any Canadian Parliament to publicly oppose the state of emergency and the lockdowns, and then the mandatory masks and mandatory jabs. The police in Ontario charged me 25 times for not abiding by the mandates and hosting no more lockdown rallies across the province. 20 charges have been withdrawn. I still have 5 of those yet to win. I have also been charged with 9 criminal offenses for being in and advocating for the Freedom Truckers convoy in Ottawa, February 2022. The Crown Attorney is seeking a 3.5-year prison sentence for my words of encouragement at the truckers convoy. Senator, today we're under and democracy is under these bright lights here in this room for all to see, and thank you. But there is much more to government that is not under the bright lights. There is a dark side to all governments. This investigative committee is seeking answers to what did they hide. It would be a much shorter committee if it was what did they not hide. However, I'll provide one short firsthand story that reveals what the political leadership in Ontario hid from everyone's view. And I believe it was neither unique nor confined to Ontario, but ubiquitous throughout the Western world, including here in the USA. During the last week of April in 2020, my position opposing the government's preposterous and outrageous mandates were well known to everyone and to all my colleagues. I knew at the time there was about a dozen other legislators who shared my views, but not one of them would be public about their position. Although I was no longer in the government caucus and I had declared myself to be an independent member of the legislature, one day I was approached by 4 senior staff members from the Premier's office. The Premier would be akin to a state governor here in the United States. They had a singular question they wanted to discuss with me, as they knew that I would give them an honest answer. And the question was, and we did this quietly and discreetly, not underneath the bright lights of democracy, but they did want an honest answer, and the question was, Randy, how do we get out of this mess? They knew that the virus and its harm and its lethality was highly exaggerated. They knew that the state of emergency was entirely unnecessary and harmful. They knew that the lockdowns were exceptionally harmful. But they also knew that the 24/7 media hysteria was out of control and had created a fearful, anxiety-ridden mob. They also knew that the Premier's closest, most influential advisors were lobbyists for pharma and tech, and that they saw the pandemic through a very, very profitable lens for themselves and for their clients. They also knew from the extensive daily polling that appealing to the mob's fear was politically beneficial. They feared, however, these 4 staffers feared the long-term damage would be horrendous to themselves, to their families, and the province. And my answer to them was very simple. I explained that they needed to be honest with the Premier and his advisors. Explain that to the public that the Premier had acted out of the abundance of caution to the uncertainty, but the facts were now known and proved that the virus was far less dangerous than first expected, that the modeling was highly fictitious and exaggerated, and that the consequences of the lockdowns were unbearable and far more dangerous than what COVID ever would be. And to simply ask for the people's understanding and forgiveness for the needless harms that were done. And in simple terms, I told them that to get out of this required them to be honest and truthful. But they told me that the truth could not be told. They could not accept that it would cost them all their jobs. So what did we hide? We hid the facts, and certainly we hid the context. We disguised all the data and all the stats. But we also abdicated our responsibilities, and instead of providing leadership, we became followers to the very mob we had created and helped to create. And then we concealed our motivations. But also, many politicians also were victims of this con job called COVID. We hid the truth, we feared honesty, and we had broken God's commandment and our covenant. And we disguised, once again, that political interests, political party interests, always trump the public's interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hillier. It strikes me, though, there are a lot of COVID tyrants around the world. Your prime minister was one of the more oppressive. Does he still have public support?
Say that again?
Does Prime Minister Trudeau still enjoy a great deal of public support in Canada?
No, his best before date is near at its end, and I'm sure he will not survive another electoral cycle if he even makes it to the next election.
I'm glad. I love Canada, love Canadians, like fishing for your walleye up in Lake of the Woods. Can you describe, some of the persecutions of the truckers? Because I thought that was very difficult to watch, and they inspired a trucker movement here in the United States as well. But it's really the Canadian truckers that had the courage to step forward and protest, and they were treated savagely, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. There was trucks vandalized by the authorities. There was physical abuse and violence. But then there was the lawfare that was applied. And as the chief of police in Ottawa said, he said, "We are going to hunt you all down," during the convoy. And they have. There's people here this weekend that were hunted down and charged a year later who had trucks in Ottawa.
And charged with what?
Charged with mischief, obstruction, generally very trivial, catch-all criminal charges. But as we know, Senator, we can, when you use the law with malice, you can make due process, due punishment very quickly. And that is what our authorities are doing in Ottawa. They're not using the justice as a shield to protect individual freedoms and liberties. They're using it as a weapon to destroy people's liberties.
Did they seize bank accounts, shut down credit cards, that type of thing?
Many people had their bank accounts frozen, their credit card accounts eliminated, mortgage accounts revoked. Many people were put in exceptionally dire financial straits for being at the Freedom Convoy. Just a few weeks ago, the authority that Trudeau used to seize those assets, so the cash in the bank accounts and the credit cards, that decision was overturned, or has been ruled ultra vires and unconstitutional, and that there was never a threat to the security of the nation during the truckers' convoy, because indeed it was the most joyful, most family-friendly, most exuberant, most happy time that the city of Ottawa has ever seen in its history.
So that's one victory, but again, it's a warning against things like government-controlled digital currencies, correct?
Say that again, please.
It's, your experience in terms of what the government did to people's bank accounts, their assets, would argue against things like government-controlled digital currencies.
Oh, listen, yeah, we have got a suite of intolerable acts coming towards us. The central bank digital currencies, the WHO pandemic treaty, the biodigital convergence, the 15-minute cities, the global warming. All of these I can best describe as another con. And 250 years ago, the American colonials saw a whole bunch of coercive, intolerable acts perpetrated by authorities, and they stood up and rebelled. We've got far, far worse coercive acts coming to all countries in the Western liberals.
I think the founders have to be spinning in their graves. But anyway, so there's an example of what happened in Canada. Now we'll turn to